Hello everyone, welcome to my craft room. I'm Hannah Catherine Brand. Thank you so much for joining me today. We are going to be working on the Fat Quarter Shop Designer Mystery Block of the Month. Here's a little sneak peek. And oh my goodness, I had quite a few mistakes in this one, so I thought at the very least, for entertainment purposes, it would be good to share them with you. There is very minimal editing in here, as you will see, but I just wanted to share what my quilting process is truly like, and that does include a few mistakes from time to time. So sharing with you today. Also, I have a little bit of extra on my eyes. I had this fancy thing going on today, but I am back in my craft room covered in, yep, there it is, covered in threads. We got the pattern on the floor, the quilt blocks in the corner, back where I belong. So with that said, let's jump into making this beautiful block. Here we have block 4 of the Designer Mystery Block of the Month. This is 2024. It is called Token of Love, and it is designed by Chelsea Stratton of Chelsea Stratton Design. So this is Chelsea from Sherry and Chelsea, for those of you familiar with them. And each block for the Designer Mystery Block of the Month series, in case you didn't gather from the name, is designed by a different designer. So it's cool that so many different people get to contribute to this project, and I love this block. It is a 12.5-inch square unfinished size, so nice and great size. And when I saw this block, I thought, I am definitely going to be filing this pattern away in my stash because I think I'm probably gonna have to make a quilt out of it. It is just so pretty. So it's really nice that you have those options as well. So here I'm just going to go through the fabric, and this beautiful fabric of this red, pink, cream, and blue. And then I'll take a look at my pattern just to tell me my cutting instructions. I'm gonna keep this off camera just out of respect for the Fat Quarter Shop and everyone else who contributes resources to this to ultimately profit off of it. So we are going to, looks like we have A through K in terms of all of the different the fabrics that we're gonna need to cut. So I keep actually most of those letters in a separate stash of alphabetties. I have a couple extra, but those are my most reached for, so we'll leave those here. And then what we'll do is get to pressing this fabric and then start cutting. Chelsea has actually said before on the podcast with her mom, Sherry, on the Quilting Life podcast, that she really divides every step of her quilting process into the 3 separate steps of cut, press, sew, and that she really tries to do as much of one thing at a time before moving on to another thing. And what's interesting about that is I am generally not like that. I kind of like to switch back and forth between all 3 things unless I'm just in a mode where I just need to do something completely mindless, but generally that's not me. I like to keep things a little exciting, but in honor of her, given that this is her block design, I'm gonna go ahead and press all of my fabric at the same time. Look at me having a little bit of discipline there. And also that will make it just a little bit easier for you, the viewer, to follow along in the steps. I'm gonna skip cutting the background fabric on camera just because I think it's boring and it doesn't show up on camera as good as some of these print fabrics do. So that's the way we're going to do it. We are cutting fabrics F and G, which are actually the same fabric sizes. We just need a different number of each. So I'll do that here, and actually I think I can get away with doing 2 strips of this, and that will accommodate my needs. If you've never done one of Fat Quarter Shop's, their block of the months or any of their kits, they are really nice in that they provide you quite a bit of extra fabric. And so I can be fairly generous with my cuts, and that, I don't have to be quite as stingy with it. I can start fresh cuts where I want them to be. I have generous scraps left over. And so that is very nice. For those of you who saw my last video, I'm making a scrap quilt with all of my Camille Russ Kelly scraps. And actually a lot of those scraps came from kits. Not all of them, but a lot of them did. And so that just makes it so cool that I'm able to get something that big and beautiful out of it. Now, something like this size, I'm gonna save in my bin of crumbs, which I am working on a crumb quilt. But something like this, I actually just go ahead and save in my scraps for this project specifically. I don't do anything with those scraps until I actually finish the project as a whole, because if I make a mistake, I know I have the extra fabric there. But then once I know I'm good to go, then I can go ahead and process them into my bigger scrap pile or do something with them. Now, fabrics H and I, these are going to be different cuts of fabric. So we're going to get a nice clean cut. And one of the dimensions on this is 1.5 inches. So I'm going to cut a strip at 1.5 inches, and I'll subcut from there. And then the other size is 3.5 inches. So I will cut another big strip. And again, this is not how I would cut if I wasn't so sure I was going to have extra fabric. But for this project, it works beautifully. And there's a nice, generous scrap for a different project. This is another example of fabric that I'm going to cut differently because I know I have the fabric to get what I need. And some might view this as wasteful, which that's fair. But for those of you who aren't quite as concerned with that, what I'm going to do here is some of these lines that I wasn't able to completely press out, I'm going to cut around them. And I would do that again on projects that I know I have the yardage for, like this one. But if I know I'm cutting it close, I'm not going to do that, and I'll get my water spritzer out and really work those creases to make sure my fabric is nice and flat. This is fabric J, if you are keeping track, and yeah, that's going to be a nice size. Also, I get lots of questions about this cutting mat. This is a Martelli rotating cutting mat, and I absolutely love it. I love it for cutting my smaller pieces. It is pricey, but it has been worth every penny. Actually, my parents got it for me for Christmas a few years ago, and I have used it. I will say they got me the one that also has the pressing mat attachment that can go on it. I have not loved that, and the pressing mat actually warped, which I thought was interesting because, you know, it's supposed to be able to take heat. And I could not figure out what I was doing wrong with it. So yeah, I don't use that anymore. So that would be my recommendation, is if you're gonna get it, save your money on that, but definitely get this. Our last patterned fabric that we're gonna cut is this one. And this fabric line is called My Summer House by Bunny Hill Designs for Moda Fabric. It is such a beautiful line, and I know I'm not getting the full exposure to it because not all of the fabrics from the line are in this quilt, but it is very pretty. I have said it's not my kind of typical color palette. Reds sometimes can make me nervous unless they're Christmassy. I guess it's like the pinkish reds. Like, I like a true red, but the pinkish reds, I don't know, they can overwhelm me a little bit, but this is just so well executed. I think it's beautiful. I'm really happy I kind of took a chance on this just because it is outside of my normal realm. But one of you commented actually recently something along the lines of, oh, you know, how funny is it that we tend to, you know, constantly say that this isn't it's not my style, it's not my style, but then we do it and we love it. And I feel like that is such a great description of my quilting. I definitely have my kind of go-to looks where it's like, I know I'm going to like something, but I've been really happy every time I've stepped outside of my comfort zone. I don't think I have any project that I truly haven't enjoyed, that I have selected for myself other than that one socialites project, which I'm actually thinking I polled you guys in a few videos ago to see what I should do, and I think I might give up the ghost on that one. It just doesn't make me happy, and I feel like it takes up valuable space, and there are so many projects that do make me happy that I know I'm going to start tackling soon. So, you know, why have that one hanging over my head like a dead goose? So I think I'm probably going to responsibly distribute that one elsewhere into the quilting world and give myself some room and some grace on it, because at the time it served me, but it doesn't anymore. And that's the beautiful thing about our hobbies, is that, you know, we can make a decision like that. Just, I don't want to do it anymore. And we don't have to. And that's okay. It's not like work where, you know, you just give up on something and a lot of people are affected by it. At least, you know, for me in my quilting life. Maybe that's not true for you. Maybe you're part of a guild and people rely on you. But in my case, I'm very blessed to be able to just kind of do whatever I want and have this be my space where if it gives me joy, then great. But if not, move on. That's okay. I am now going to cut all of my background fabric, and I will meet you back here to show you all of my pieces and get started on the first step toward piecing this beautiful block. Our pieces are all cut, and my apologies, it is really dreary outside today, so it is a little dark in here. Generally, we have this beautiful natural light, and it is so beautiful, so I hope you can still see everything well. But this is our finalized cutting situation, and here are the meaningful scraps that I was able to keep from this. Look how good this is. So many possibilities here, but again, staying disciplined, keeping these to the side just in case I end up needing them later in the project. And then just a couple little crumbs, so these will go in my crumb pile. And then these are just salvages and small scraps that are going in the garbage. So now it's time to start piecing. It looks like we're going to start with doing some half square triangles. So we're going to be taking the fabric B squares and the fabric F squares and making 4 of those. So that will be our first step. And then we'll line everything up into a unit. Also, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit in the pattern just for efficiency's sake, and we're going to be sewing fabric K and fabric D rectangles together. Oops, you can't see that. There you go. And then we'll make 4 of those, and I'm going to stitch these up together, and then we'll come back for the next instructions. Now that I have gotten some sewing done on a few of my steps, I'm going to go ahead and take apart my chain piecing. I don't know what's going on here. And press. I think these half square triangles I'm also going to have to cut. Let me just refer back to my pattern, and yes, we are. Actually, you know what? I definitely sewed these wrong. I got ahead of myself. I stitched on the middle instead of a 1/4 inch from the middle. So I'm gonna have to redo these, but I'm really glad I didn't cut them already. But since we're here, let's go ahead and press. We're actually gonna be pressing these to the light side instead of the dark side. So I'm gonna do that. Beautiful. Since I messed these up, I'm going to have to get out the trusty old seam ripper, which I really like this one. It works really well, but you know, anytime you have to use it, it's like usually a little bit of a frustrating moment. So we're going to just pick out these seams and try again. The good news is I don't have to spend too much time like picking out the thread or anything, because this part of the fabric is going to get cut anyway, since I'm sewing on either side of the center. So, and there were only 2 of them, so not worst case scenario. All right, let's try this again. So instead of putting my tip in the center of my tape, I am putting it on the far one, keeping that straight. Now we're gonna stitch. See, this is what happens when you don't pay close attention. Also, I'm still learning how to cut and talk accurately. So you know what, this was bound to happen at some point, and I'm glad it happened on a low risk project where there was a ton of fabric left over and it wasn't super time consuming to fix. So I'll just, take these, and we're gonna do the same thing on the other side. So that way we have created 2 half square triangle units, if you will, from 1 square. Nifty, right? And half square triangles can be difficult for me, so I'm probably gonna have to trim these down just to make sure they're accurate. So we'll go back over to cut these apart and press. I'm also just gonna trim these threads. I'm getting better about trimming threads as I go, because of course, you know, I don't want to send a big hairy mess to the long armor. But then, you know, when you finish a project and you're like so excited to send it off, it seems like such a tedious task. So I'm trying to get better about doing that so it goes quickly. All right, now we can cut these in half. Also, I get a lot of questions about starching. I do not starch my fabric. I did when I first started quilting because the people I watched did it, and I did not do it correctly. I starched inconsistently and on pre-cuts that I needed the length of fabric for, and yeah, it went poorly, so I'm a little bit scarred from it still. I just don't. It's just one extra thing, one extra step. One day, maybe I might get into it. I've had so many of you recommend some products that you like better than starch, because I do love watching, like, I know Kimberly Jolly from Fat Quarter Shop, she starches a ton. I think, is it Susan Aki, I think, who also does, and that taught her. And I love looking at her beautiful finished blocks. They just lay so flat, and they aren't these like little hairy monsters like I feel like mine are. But I guess I have a hard time justifying it because maybe it makes the process better. But then when I send my quilt to be quilted and I get it back and then I use it and wash it, because I use all of my quilts, I love them. It's, crinkly and all, and it's still beautiful. I guess I just feel like you kind of get the same product. Maybe I'm misguided on that front, but yes, perhaps the journey is not as aesthetic, but I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on that. Again, I might be speaking out of turn there. They say the first rule of public relations is to stay in your lane. I am not staying in my lane in saying all of that, but that's just kind of the determination that I have made at this point in time. But you know, I've only been quilting for what, 2.5 years? So things could change. Things could change. I'm open to it. All right. Now we have these beautiful half square triangles that were done correctly. We have these units. So let's go back to our cutting area where I like to lay everything out and dive into next steps. Next, we're using the half square triangles to make something that Chelsea is calling the tassel units. So I'm just going to get these all oriented the same. And we are going to put these in the top left corner and then add fabric E rectangles to the side. And then we're going to take our fabric I little squares here, and these are going to go in the corners. And so as I've said before, you know, I just think of everything like rows. It just makes it so much easier. So these two will go together. These two will go together. We'll press opposite directions. So it looks like this seam is going to the right. This seam is going to the left. That will make these connecting seams lay nice and flat because they'll nest. And then we will sew the top part and the bottom part together. And that will give us what she's calling our tassel unit, which is a 3.5 inch square piece of this block, and we're making 4 of them. So far, we have accomplished 4 of these tassel units, and we will put those off to the side for now. And then we also, don't forget, have 4 of these types of units. So they're calling them the ribbon unit. And so now it's time to jump into the other steps. So it looks like we're going to be taking fabric A and also fabric H, which there's just one of each, and we are cutting on the diagonal twice. So this is where something like a rotating cutting mat comes in handy. So we'll just cut that there. Whoops. And then put it back together just a little bit before we make our second cut. And so then we have these 4 triangles. So we'll set this to the side and then also cut our background fabric just the same way. All right. And then it looks like we have a little bit more cutting to do. So we're going to also be taking the fabric G squares, and now we have 2 of these. And I'm going to get my directions the same. I'm not super picky. You may have noticed this before if you've watched me before, but I'm not super picky with directional fabric. I feel like for the most part, you know, once it gets in the quilt, it's hard to, you know, notice. I guess if you display a quilt on the wall or something, that might be the exception, or if you're submitting for a show or something like that, but just I make these for fun. So I'm not super picky about them unless it's like an obvious fabric where it's like people or something, animals. I don't want them running upside down, but something like this, like a floral, yeah, we can be generous with that. So now that I have my triangles cut out, it looks like they are going to be oriented as follows. We'll have this fabric G right there, and then we're going to be attaching fabric A and then fabric H like that. And sorry, because they're stacked, it's a little bit difficult to see. Let me get this straightened out. Okay. So the idea is that you sew these together, it creates a triangle, and then you attach the triangles together and you get a square. So we'll make 4 of these squares, and she's calling them a braid unit. and they measure 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. So we will get that done. One more thing, actually, before we get to work on that, I'm gonna go ahead and make what we're calling the twist unit as well. Just while I'm at the sewing machine, this is going to be a fabric B square and fabric J squares, and we're just gonna put those right sides together and make some more half square triangles just since we're at the sewing machine. And I am going to remind myself we are not stitching down the middle, we are stitching 1/4 inch from the middle on both sides. So we're going to take all this to the sewing machine, and that will be the last pieces of the units that we have to create, and then we get to lay them all out together, and it will be so exciting and beautiful, and the final steps of getting this block complete. All right, our pieces are stitched. So now I'm just gonna do a little bit of cleanup. Cut these. There we have these half square triangles. We'll set that aside while we do the other one. Cut this one. Whoops. A little bit of a funky seam allowance there, but that's okay for now. Okay, cut these up. This will need a really good pressing because I just finger pressed the seam open. We'll also need to cut off those dog ears, but all in good time. All right, okay, so now we get to press. I'm gonna go ahead and just, like I said, press these open first, and then that will also set my seam here. So now that's all nice and flat. And let me also refer to my pattern to see what direction they want me pressing. Okay, toward the pink, we can do that. And I can already tell you these are gonna need to be trimmed down. So I'm actually, instead of trimming my dog ears first, I'm just gonna go ahead and trim down the square as a whole. And then I'll touch up any dog ears that need to be trimmed. These are looking good so far. I already said how much I love this block, so I am just particularly eager to get this one done. And these were hiding. I actually lost 2 of these triangles when I was sewing, and I went back and watched the footage from my cutting because I was like, I know for a fact I cut these correctly. Sure enough, I did, and I did end up finding the pieces, but it was so funny that I had to consult the video evidence to make sure. I was like, we cannot have 2 mistakes in one video, certainly not. And so far, we have not, just the one. All right. Last one here. And then, let's see, we're gonna be pressing toward the aqua. And I'll go ahead and finish. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, well, there was our second mistake. You know what? Pride comes before the fall, doesn't it? So I'm gonna fix this. We'll get that looking a lot better. And then I am going to trim down because these are looking just a little wonky. And we will get to the exciting part of laying everything out. It's time. So first we will start in the center and put our center block. And then we're going to be adding one of these to each side, and I'm just checking my pattern to make sure everything's oriented the right way, because I feel like this is definitely a block that it would be easy to mess that up. So we're also going to do the top and bottom. Top, bottom, okay. And then we're going to be taking our half square triangles and putting those with the background fabric facing in. I am also so glad I trimmed these down. They were really funky. So definitely check that when you're doing this, because you will likely need to trim everything down just to get it nice and accurate and a better result. So there is the center. And then I will obviously sew this up together first, but for what it's worth, since we're going to just lay out everything together, I'm also going to be adding these ribbon units, and this is where things are really getting special. So we'll have this up top and just repeat the same thing all around. And then we're going to be adding these units. I forgot about these. There's been a good amount of sewing in this block. We'll add these all around. And obviously everything's, not quite fitting together yet just because of the seam allowances, but that's essentially how everything's going to go. So like I say, think about everything in rows. So this is a row, this is a row, this is a row. Rows get sewed together to make this block. Then what we do is this is a row, and then this, center square will be part of this row. We'll sew those together and then do the same sort of thing on the bottom. And that is how we make our block. And actually, oh my goodness, y'all, I am laughing so hard because I am looking at this now. Remember how we were talking about mistakes? So this is definitely supposed to go in, but I can't just flip it around because I need these cornerstone units. So I actually have this upside down. So, oh no. So that does mean we're going to have to go back in with this seam ripper and fix these if we want them to look like the pattern or the sample, which I really like the sample. And I think that the pink, like I just, sometimes I would be like, oh, whatever, it's my quilt, I can do what I want, which that is true. But in this case, I like how this looks. So you know what? I'm gonna have to fix it. So, oh no. Okay, well, that's all right. We will do that. So my next steps will be fixing these. So what I'll do is basically I'm gonna have to take this whole thing apart. And then make sure, or actually, let me see. I think, yeah, actually all I have to do is just take this out and flip it to make sure that that's cracked. You know what? I should have known, because when I was pressing these, I was like, this feels weird. It doesn't feel like it's wanting to go that way. And that, I bet, is it. So yeah, this is upside down. But anyway, we will fix these, and then we're gonna stitch everything up, and through the magic of editing, this is the final block. How pretty is this one? Thank you all for sticking around through this very dramatic making of block 4 of the 2024 Designer Mystery Block of the Month. Again, the block was designed by Chelsea Stratton, and it features My Summer House by Bunny Hill Designs for Motive Fabrics fabric, and I love it. Like I said, I might have to make a full quilt out of just this block repeated through, and since I made so many mistakes making this one, you know, I'm hopefully going to be a lot better when I go and make that quilt one day. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed making this block with me through the trials and the tribulations. We got to the finish line and I'm really loving it. I think it's beautiful, and I hope that this candid look at everything behind the scenes is encouraging to you and that we all make mistakes. Thank you again for watching. It is always such an honor to have you spend your time with me here in my craft room and on my Eaddy's Craft Room channel. Thank you, thank you, thank you from the bottom of my heart. And until next time, happy crafting.